Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of CleanTechies, the podcast. I'm your host, Silas Maynor, and I'm back with Season 2, Episode 4, or if you're counting from the beginning, Episode 16. And again, just off the bat, if you like this content and this show, please do subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be made aware of this stuff in the future. Also, a quick reminder that our podcast, this podcast, is sponsored and made possible by Next Wave Partners. Next Wave Partners are experts in the renewable energy, infrastructure, ESG, climate tech, and tech recruitment business. So if you are looking to grow your team or take your career to the next step, please do reach out to Next Wave Partners. You can reach out to them via any of their consultants on LinkedIn, or you can email them directly at info@next-wavepartners.com. And that's next-wavepartners.com. And a little bit about today's episode. So today's episode, I was pleasured with the opportunity to speak with Shannon Neumann. She is the Director of Product at Mondelez International, which is a very large snack conglomerate that owns brands such as Oreo, for example. And basically, she was on the show today to discuss the upcycling of snacks. So just kind of a newer terminology, upcycling in general, which is something we've talked about on the podcast before, kind of at a more broader sense with resources in general. But upcycling in the snack industry is kind of typically taking wasted byproducts of maybe imperfect pretzels or something like that and turning them into another snack where they can be sold as a separate product that wouldn't be typically acceptable from the consumer if they were not looking as nice. So that's typically what they talk about in the upcycling of snacks. But in terms of what we talked about today, we also kind of got onto the topic of upcycling in general regarding the waste of the products, such as the cacao fruit, which obviously is where we get chocolate from, and it's something we'll get into the episode. I won't give away too much, but basically taking those byproducts, those leftovers, and making more products out of those so that it's not just going to waste and rotting. So very interesting episode. We talked about that. We talked about the upcycling of snacks in general, kind of some of the macro trends that are happening. And it was just a very, very interesting episode and super informative. So I really hope you enjoy this episode with Shannon Neumann, the Director of Product for their brand from Mondelez called CaPao, a cacao fruit. So very interesting episode, and we'll just get into the show. All right, welcome to the podcast, Shannon. I appreciate you coming on. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you, Silas. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Very good. Well, why don't you, for everybody listening, why don't you just give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of where you're at currently and how you got there?
Yeah, for sure. So I am an associate director within Mondelez International. It's a huge food company that has brands like Oreo, Trident, Sour Patch Kids, some really great iconic brands. I'm part of a smaller group within Mondelez, which is called Snack Futures. We were created about 2 years ago, and we're an innovation and venture hub. And the purpose behind creating that group was to try to follow along with the way that consumers were snacking differently and trying to keep up with those consumer trends. So people were obviously still indulging in these fantastic snacks that we have like Oreo, but they were looking for different options. They're looking for variety. They're looking for wellness. They're looking for experiences. And we wanted to form a group that really could focus on meeting the needs of these new emerging consumers. And so it's been a really exciting ride the past years trying to be entrepreneurs, so like an entrepreneur within a larger company, and create new things.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us a little bit. Obviously, the whole kind of purpose of what you guys are doing is the reason we're on the show here is the upcycling aspect. So I'm curious to know, do you have any kind of personal journey that helps you to lead you here? Maybe your experience regarding something you've seen in the world, or just kind of a moment in your life when you realized that you were here to do something more than just for yourself,
Yeah, if I take it like back before not having anything to do with what I'm doing at work and what my job is today, I go like from a personal perspective. A few years ago, I found like I was struggling at home when it came to cooking. I would go grocery shopping with the intent to cook, but this combination of lack of time, lack of skill, really led to ingredients going bad. Like I just didn't know either what to do with them or didn't have time. And I really started to feel horrible about that. Just realizing that they're going wasted and there could be so much better use for them in some other way. And so I started to use some of the subscription box services like Blue Apron and HelloFresh. And I felt like I was truly starting to make a difference there from a personal perspective. And that carried over also into just my plastic consumption, my recycling. So started to really think about the impact I had personally on the environment as a whole. And then what was just fantastic kind of at the right around that same time, just a little bit later, was this program with the company I worked with called Cocoa Life, where I was selected to be an ambassador. Cocoa Life is Mondelez's global cocoa sustainability program. So they're really kind of working at tackling really complex challenges within cocoa growing regions. It's making sure that farmers are getting the right price for their crops, that they're understanding the issue of climate change, gender inequality, things like child labor and poverty. And by being part of this program, I got to spend a couple of weeks in Ghana in a cocoa growing community. And it was just, it's a phenomenal experience being on the ground and understanding how impactful a fruit is on an entire community. It really does. It touches every aspect of what's happening there. And being able to both contribute towards their education and how they can build sustainable practices, help to get more yield, help them to build their communication skills. It felt both fulfilling personally as well as from a professional standpoint, but it also had me coming back home and looking for ways that I can turn that into something more. And the Snack Futures group that we are a part of, one of our, we call it a game board space, but it's really this territory we explore is called Planet First. It's how do we create new products through the lens of the planet first, versus trying to, another, for example, is gut health. You're taking the lens of treating that. Here, it's like, how do we create something that really does think about the planet? And one of the projects that we were exploring at the time was how you can take more of the cacao fruit, which is typically wasted on the forest floor. And I guess a lot of people don't realize that cacao is a fruit. They know it for chocolate, this like magical bean that creates like delicious things. But there's a pulp that surrounds that bean. There's a pod or a husk that protects that fruit. And the nutrients and the flavor experiences within those parts of the fruit are incredible. And they were really just being left on the kind of the plantation farms because of that magical bean. So that, which is like 30% of the total cacao fruits being. So seeing that and being able to have some other like-minded partners to think through, like, well, what could we then do with it? How can we contribute in some way, both from a business perspective, but from a consumer perspective? How do we bring something to consumers to both introduce this experience to them? No one within the United States, I said no one, most within the United States don't know what an actual cacao fruit tastes like. And it's one of our challenges when we're communicating. They think it's going to taste like chocolate. That's what cacao is. It's very complex, and it's actually really fruity and zesty and delicious. It's like this combination of lychee and citrus. Which is really fantastic. So just trying to introduce new things to consumers, but in the process do something good, and tackling food waste and upcycling is a way for us to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you maybe talk to us a little bit more about this specific brand? You mentioned, CaPao. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Super interesting, cool name, by the way, too. But just talk to us more a little bit about the brand and stuff, and how you guys have gone on this journey and created this new snack that you're upcycling. And talk to us a little bit more about the upcycling mindset in general, too.
Yeah, no, for sure. So CaPao was completely on the mission of rescuing and reimagining parts of the cacao fruit that I talked about. We're going to waste during chocolate production. And what we saw was about 14 million tons of cacao fruits are harvested around the world every year. But because just that 30%, that seed, the bean inside, is what was being used, that's 10 million tons of the fruit that are wasted. So that's the husk and the pulp. So what we do is we started with the pulp. We take that pulp that was being wasted and we incorporate it into other real simple ingredients. So they are plant-based. They include things like mango, coconut, apricot, golden berries, chia seeds. They're really simple, clean ingredients, nothing artificial. And we really try to manage the total kind of nutritional content to make sure it's a better for you snack into something that consumers can eat. It's a great snack mid-morning, great for an afternoon, something maybe we have a new flavor called cherry almond cocoa. That's a nice little kind of a more indulgent treat that you can have later in the evening. So really trying to provide an alternative to consumers for snacking. The upcycling bit of it is, I mean, it's an interesting one. Consumers in general think of upcycling, they don't think of food. They think upcycling like plastics, take sea plastics and turn it into sneakers now, right? Or old furniture and kind of zhuzhing it up and creating something new out of it. How can they take things and rather than put them in a landfill or throw them into our oceans, how can they make something out of it? And there's this really huge, I think, misconception when it comes to upcycled food, specifically about its perceived quality. But we know that food waste is huge. 30% of all food produced globally goes to waste for any number of reasons, but it has a huge impact on the planet. That could be surplus on the farms. It could be, in the case of cacao fruit, they're just harvesting that bean versus the rest of it. It could be it's imperfect food. It's wonky, it's got some bruising, or it just goes bad in your refrigerator and it gets tossed out. But that impact is significant. It contributes to global warming, it creates emissions. And there's this fantastic stat from Project Drawdown. It's the global leader or ranking in climate solutions is if you can prevent food waste, it's the single most effective solution to preventing global warming, and that's by more than 2 degrees Celsius. So it's a huge contributor to what's happening within the environment, and it also just feels wrong when you think about also the parts of the world that are struggling with getting enough food. The fact that we are wasting a third of it seems kind of wrong in many ways. So our friends at the Upcycled Food Association, it was created in 2019, I believe, relatively new. It was created by a series of companies, of universities, of people just like-minded in this, wanting to create a definition behind what upcycled food is and create this movement behind it. They've got some great research, and it's really enlightening. They say so 60% of people want to buy more upcycled food products once they understand what it is, once they understand that it's safe, that there's nothing wrong with it, that what you're doing is just elevating the use of something that may not have been used before into a delicious, nutritious form of food. And once they understand that, and that's because, I mean, really 95% of consumers want to do their part in reducing food waste. They don't really know how to do it. It's a pretty overwhelming concept. So it's an opportunity for consumers, I think, to really put their money where their mouth is. People eat.
I think this is super interesting to me in general. It's like, there's a lot of consumers that want something, right? And we're driving it, we're asking for more things, but it's out of our hands, right? Most consumers that have daily jobs, they can't do anything about it besides buy things, right? So we need to, I'm interested, maybe have some thoughts on this or some initiatives that are being done, but are there ways or things and places people can join and be part of to try to help get the voice out that, hey, we want these products. We want more of this stuff, because obviously companies are the ones who have to create these things in order to feed the market. No pun intended.
No, absolutely. And they do. And it's fabulous to see this happening, because this movement happening. People, it is overwhelming. I think it's overwhelming from all aspects of sustainability, and from a personal perspective, it's like, how can I contribute? I can stop using plastic straws. I can protect the food that's in my fridge or store it in a way that will help it last longer. I can throw things that are going bad into smoothies because they're still going to taste great. So there's I think a lot of really great ways to inform consumers, everyday consumers, on how to do that. And Upcycled Food Association is a fantastic group. I think at the moment a little bit more industry led, so they're trying to make the movement, but where they're really helping is by creating a definition and a consistent language. It allows consumers and companies, so companies like Mondelez and CaPao, companies like, there's great other products out there, both in food, pet food, other kind of industries that can use upcycled ingredients using a common language. So, like I said before, we originally started saying we were rescued and reimagined, because when you say food waste, people put on this negative kind of connotation, or this hat on of, well, I don't want to eat that, it's going to be bad. The more we use common language, the more we really bring in retailers. So I think a huge movement this year was Whole Foods. Whole Foods put upcycled food within their top 10 trends to watch for 2021. Kroger as well is another large one. They created a fund and are supporting entrepreneurs who are creating snacks out of, or foods out of, upcycled ingredients. The more that we are elevating the conversation, the more people like me and my partners in other companies are talking to the press, the public, just in general. The more we bring awareness to the issue, but also the opportunity, we address the misconceptions while providing solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because obviously there's always this kind of, capitalism is evil type of mentality that tends to run through, because there's been obviously bad examples of it. But I think that it's important to remember that can be a great solution, given the fact that we as consumers can drive the demand, and it will be met with options because companies care about making money, right? I think that just the whole idea that Tom Rand put in his book of capitalism behind fixing climate changes is very relevant here.
I think what's really important from a consumer perspective, though, is also to keep companies honest. So there's a lot of greenwashing out there, right? So people will, they will play on the trend, and they will say that their product does this. We really do kind of, as a whole, really keep everyone honest about it. Really stand for what you're saying, and back up what you're doing, and that will go a long way in helping to address consumer speculation.
Yeah, and I think that that's something kind of more on the technology side of things. I've seen a bit of interesting stuff happening in this place because, like you said, greenwashing is happening a lot. And I know people complain about it, and then they say, "Oh, what's the purpose? Like, why even bother?" But in reality, we still need the demand because we'll be able to find the greenwashing. Because before you know it, we're going to have certifications and technology that can track all these things and really make it totally transparent, which is what we need. So this is interesting. I'd be kind of curious to know, generally speaking, what have some of the big challenges been for you guys with this new product, these new product lines or whatever? I'm just curious in general, like maybe whatever it is, whatever the big challenges are.
I think there are a few. So one, go back to just the creation of an upcycled product, and it's sourcing. So the availability and the consistency of the materials are actually a little bit of a challenge. You think it's food waste, it should be pretty simple and it should be pretty cheap, but that we don't have kind of processes or supply chains in place really today to source a lot of these ingredients and convert them into a means of delivering to the consumer and a fantastic, great tasting product. So we're building that infrastructure. Every time a company wants to deliver something like this to the world, we're building that infrastructure with our supply chain partners in place. So it's a little bit of a slower moving and expensive process to start, with the idea that like economies of scale will come as we grow and as that message comes out. So that's one of the earlier kind of like in the supply chain end of things, challenges that we face. Another one is, I mentioned earlier, is communication. It's finding that right message, not just to the consumer, but to the retailer, about why you should put this product on your shelf instead of another one. And that other one could come from a huge brand. It could be, it could deliver faster turns because it's easier to explain or for consumers to understand right now. And as this movement is building, we have to accept that it's a little bit of a slower growth. Our trajectory is going to be kind of like slow and steady. Hopefully wins the race as more people are educated. But that communication, we can't just communicate that we're this great tasting product, you should buy us. We have to explain and on our case, there's two things we have to explain. One is that it's not chocolate, it's cacao fruit. So if you're expecting it to taste like chocolate, it doesn't. It tastes like this fruity, zesty, delicious thing, but also that it comes from upcycled cacao fruit, which is helping the planet. We're helping farmers make more for their crops. We're helping to address food waste. So by you purchasing that product, you're contributing to that kind of that overall idea. So there's a lot in there to get across.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge if you think about it. Unless you're a fully vertically integrated company, like all the way to distribution, because I mean, I didn't even think about that, right? You got so many small stores, and even like, I think Whole Foods is an example of a probably pretty forward thinking example, but you've got all these smaller distributors, and to convince them these things when they're like, no, I'm so used to, like, I know the mentality, I know what to do, I'm going to keep doing what makes me money. There's obviously that whole education process. So that's a very noble pursuit, I think. And it's great to see somebody taking on, because like you said, there's going to be this trend that slowly builds and eventually it'll take over, and economies of scale should kick in for everybody's favor. So that's good. One thing I'm a little bit curious too is, obviously this is kind of, it sounds like it's relatively in the early stages for you guys, but kind of, could you talk to more about the variety both in your products and what can be done? Because obviously this is upcycling an entirely wasted part of a fruit, right? I know there's upcycling in regards to broken pretzels or broken almonds that are then turned into other types of snacks. But what are the variety from what you guys are doing, but also the potential for the entire industry at large?
When we think about our example, the variety and the potential is actually quite huge. So we took these kind of two elements of the raw ingredient, the pulp and the shell, and gave it to our culinary team and said, what can you do with this? And the initial stages of R&D development were actually pretty incredible, that we came up with a ton of ideas in the beverage space, in snacking, in fruit snacking, as well as in baking. So really lots of applications for it. We worked to kind of narrow down what that introductory product would be. And what we started with, and what you see on the market today, are our cacao fruit bites. So kind of like bite-sized snackable kind of snacks, but the potential is huge. And right now what we're doing is really just using the pulp. There's an opportunity to expand, to hit other occasions within snacking, to bring in, if you took the shell of the cacao fruit and you can turn it into a flour and use that as a kind of a flour alternative, and put that into almost any type of baking product. So as well as I said, kind of like into the beverage type of space, and you can take it into candy. You can take it and actually take it out of food and put it into cosmetics. You've got this, you see lots of beauty products out there that are upcycling ingredients as well, and kind of fruit and produce are great means of kind of transferring into the beauty space. So just the cacao fruit alone has lots of opportunity. We have a new format that will be coming out in October. So I can tease it, but I can't necessarily share it just yet, which really does kind of continue to play with it and take it into a different space. So we're excited to keep growing and providing more options. But if you think about, step back more broadly, there are some great products out there. Kind of Pulp Chips is one. Pulp Pantry is the company. What they do is they take the excess pulp from fresh pressed juices. They work with companies that produce fresh pressed juices. They take that leftover pulp, and that pulp is just fantastic nutrients, and they make them into chips, savory chips. So it's an alternative to your tortilla chip, your potato chip, and they're really unique and they're fantastic. So there's another company that turns products into vodka. They take like old going bad bakery products and turn it into a vodka. It's kind of mind blowing. The company, it's Lost and Found Distillery. So really super cool.
That's very interesting. I mean, I feel like there's so many things that vodka comes from. So that's interesting. Not too surprising to hear it, but also quite surprising.
It is. Yeah. So there's so much creative opportunity out there. It's just a matter of like unleashing like people's imaginations into what you can do with it.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, again, like you said, think about probably so many of the major brands that we're used to, the candy bars we have, all of those things. There is a lot of waste that can be reimagined. I think that I'm glad we're having this conversation because, again, like you said, most people don't know what it is, right? I for a while was getting my groceries from Imperfect Foods when I was back in New York City, and I'd tell people about it, and they're like, "So you're getting like rotten groceries?" And I'm like, no, I'm getting things that aren't quite fit for, the perfect world that we need, that most people want to see, right? But they're still great food. And I think that just sharing this and getting people to realize, oh, this is what it means, that shared language you talked about, that's going to be very impactful, more than we realize. So that's good. um, what are some of the trends that you see, generally speaking? Again, this can be in terms of, broadly, we understand people are starting to move to this, but could you maybe talk and walk us through what you see and how you see the trends unfolding, and maybe even some of the challenges that will have to be then solved once we get to the next level? Because I know with this whole climate tech revolution, essentially, there's a lot of layers, right? We solve one layer and then it opens up the problems of many more. So could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so trends, it's within, I think within the upcycled space, it's really just beginning. It's the what may have started back in the imperfect misfit market, imperfect foods days, was taking these wonky vegetables, things that if you went into a grocery store, you might pass up because it didn't look like, it was like two apples formed together and it just didn't look like it would be good. That was the bit of the start of it. And now it's opening that opportunity up to so much more. And it's so the trend is really, how can you take something that may not have been used before and transform it into something else? And that's extending beyond just the food category, but it's expanding into cosmetics, into fashion, into any kind of consumable kind of or consumer good, which is incredible to see. You pair that with some of the other bigger trends that are happening if you look in the food movement today. So one is, other ways of helping from a sustainability perspective is trying to cut back on your carbon footprint. How are you producing these goods in a way that is perhaps as sustainable as possible? So one example is, yes, we're adding an upcycled ingredient into our product. What we're also doing is making sure that we're producing in a sustainable way. So our manufacturing facility is 100% wind powered. So we're trying
Mhm.
to make sure that we're walking the talk. Packaging is a tough one. Consumer goods is, I mean, they're packaged, right? They're any food out there has some sort of packaging to it, and there's a purpose behind that package. It's to keep the product fresh, it's to add convenience, it's what consumers are looking for. But the movement to try to be as sustainable as possible in your packaging is going to continue to grow. And one challenge is we need packaging suppliers to catch up to that demand. um, Packaging suppliers are, they're phenomenal. They're incredibly smart and have means in getting there. The problem is scale. And it was kind of, I was talking to it earlier, and we're in that early stage of using, or how you take upcycled ingredients and transform them into things. Same thing with packaging. How do you transform a packaging system that's currently incredibly efficient and was delivering on consumer needs from 20 years ago, and reinvent it into something that's more sustainable and that provides consumers with other options? And then on the flip side, the infrastructure within the country, within towns, the ability to recycle things and where that goes isn't, it's very much a town by town process. There isn't one universal means of what you can recycle, how you recycle it, and where it actually goes. I mean, that the recycling system is complicated. I mean, just as someone who at home who has a recycling service, I'm always looking at, is this number on the bottom of my package something that I can put into a recycle bin or not? And if I can't, well, why the hell not? Like, what can be
Yeah.
done? So
Mhm.
there's all these layers within that consumers are very kind of aware of, conscious of, and wanting to do better. We as because like within the manufacturing world need to find these solutions, and we need our suppliers to kind of get there as well, so that we can contribute. The challenge, particularly for us, is you've got an ingredient that might be more expensive because it's supply chain. You want to create something that is good for consumers. So the ingredients all in there are only real fruits and vegetables or nuts or seeds. So they also come a bit of a price premium. Your packaging, you want it to be fully, at a minimum, fully recyclable. Unfortunately, that comes at a premium as well. And so how do we have to work very hard to make sure that we're trying to do good for consumers, but not outpricing ourselves from their daily lives, not making it something that isn't accessible to them at the same time.
Yeah, because if you breach that line, then you're really ultimately scratching out the good you've done, because you can't if you can't turn a profit at least somewhat. It's a very tough, very thin line to draw. I'm really curious about this. Maybe I'm not sure if you have any thoughts or kind of knowledge about this, but I think it's very similar to the oil and gas and renewable space, where there's people innovating, right? And then the big oil and gas guys, they're realizing, oh boy, we need to get on this trend, and they have a big balance sheet to back it up. And then they kind of go in. I know obviously Shell has done a pretty good job of this, like innovating in that space. What do you see with the existing conventional snack producers that are? Do you see them maybe changing the way they actually produce their current snacks, or maybe even changing their snacks a little bit in order that they're wasting less in the production process, or really kind of getting wind of this trend and then just spearheading it and just putting a lot of infrastructure money behind it? And again, there's obviously the regulatory process and all these things that can help bolster it. Do you see anything like that coming in the future?
Absolutely. And not just the future. It's been something that, so I'm almost 20 years in as a marketer in the food space, working for companies like Nabisco and Kraft and Cadbury, Mondelez. So one of the as a brand manager, one of the biggest things that we're looking at on our P&L as we're growing, I've worked on brands like Trident, is managing waste. And it's not just managing waste and like in the retail or the consumer level, but it's within our own manufacturing process. I mean, whatever we're constantly working to make those lines in the manufacturing process efficient. So we're not wasting ingredients. We're not wasting packaging. We're finding ways to rework things back into either our existing products or other products. So it's always been something very top of mind. And that is both a combination of not wanting to waste, but it comes as a hit to our P&L, and that ultimately can get translated into what the consumer's paying, and we don't want to do that. So that's always been very top of mind, but more so, even more so now. I think what's really exciting is seeing how people are rethinking what they can do with their waste, and it's not just what they can do, but they're challenging their supply chain, what they can do. And so, if you think about Mondelez broadly as a big cookie cracker manufacturer, things like Triscuit are like fantastic products within the manufacturing process. If you're getting kind of excess crumbs or breakage or things that you can then take and repurpose into something else, why wouldn't you? Like why the question is, it's
Yeah.
really the opportunity is there, and we're more aware of it, and we're thinking from two solutions. One, it's an internal solutions, like how are we addressing our own waste, but also, well, by addressing our own waste, we can create something that the consumer is going to want to purchase as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's the same thing with, again, I've said this probably every time I've had somebody on this podcast, is that all of these climate tech and clean tech kind of solutions, they typically are just kind of creating something out of nothing, right? You have a waste, or these farmers, right? I don't know how it's set up, if typically the farms are owned by Mondelez or whatnot, but the farmers, regardless of who they are, they have a product, and they have also another product that's just not being used, right? So they can just add to their total bottom line by simply harvesting everything. And the same thing with all the waste, right? It can just be turned into new products, especially with companies who have the means and the manufacturing process to actually do so. I just think it's incredible. It's just a total mindset shift.
Yeah, I mean, if taking it back to cacao fruit, so Barry Callebaut is a huge chocolate manufacturer. They created a division called Cabas Naturals to specifically address the fact that you've got the pulp and the shell that's sitting on the forest floor, and there's something they can do with it. And so they created a division within this huge chocolate company in order to find means of using those ingredients and supply it to people like me for CaPao.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. This is fascinating. I think we've covered a lot today. There's obviously just this whole broad mindset in general for people to realize that, upcycling and these products, they're not coming from, garbage. It's coming from, we're trying to make sure we take viable things and get them still used. We don't want this waste. It's so unnecessary. And I feel like there's probably a large aspect of doing this. And once we get it effectively, spread out across the world, there's a lot of people at the very early stages of supply chain. They're going to benefit from this a lot. And we can help on the entire spectrum of social and impact in investing in our own dollars as consumers. So I think this is super exciting. I guess just finally, any final thoughts, and where can people find your products?
Yeah, I think so. One final thought to build on is the recent certification. So the Upcycled Food Association has partnered with the certifying body to create an upcycled food certification. So similar to non-GMO project verified organic certification, there is now a mark that companies can get to put on their package that confirms to consumers that this product is certified upcycled. And what that certification does is just help to further communicate like what upcycled food is and the benefits of it. But it also is kind of a seal of quality. It helps to confirm that this product is validated, that it's a quality product, and hopefully helps address the misconception that food waste is not good, that which shouldn't be included. So we're really excited at CaPao that we're one of the first brands to be upcycled certified. We're really starting to make the push of communicating what that means to consumers and getting it out there. And we've done some great initial consumer research with consumers to ask them, this is a new thing that's out there. Does it impact your willingness to try or buy CaPao, one, but also upcycled foods with that certification? And we had 54% of respondents opinions favorably that with the certification they would be more willing to purchase an upcycled food product. So I think the certification is going to be a huge impact on this movement, and I'm excited to see more brands start to go for it and to really communicate it. And like I said, CaPao is certified. We have our cacao fruit bites that are currently sold on our D2C site, so capaofruit.com, as well as in select stores across Southern California. So our retail footprint is still a little small, but we're looking to expand that, and we'll be launching a new format in October just to kind of help further that.
Very nice. Hopefully you can secure that Whole Foods partnership sometime soon. All right. Very good. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do in the future. We'll definitely have to have you on again once we've created together a better, more kind of advanced trend here, and people understand. So, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks, Silas. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much for joining on today's episode with Shannon Neumann. I really hope you found a lot of value out of this conversation. I think it's a topic not a lot of people have had opportunities to talk about or to read about or learn about. So I think it was very interesting for me, at least. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. So as always, if you do have any interesting thoughts you wanted to share, or maybe further questions you wanted to ask about it, feel free to reach out or tweet me at on social media. I can be tweeted at. You can find me at Silas Maynor. Otherwise, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Pretty much anywhere on the internet, I'm typically pretty good at getting back to people. So feel free to share your thoughts there. Or you can also you can get more involved by joining our CleanTechies Slack channel. We have some discussions going on in there from time to time regarding the podcasts and the episodes, just helping each other to learn more about what's going on. So that's a great way to get further involved. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. Our newsletter comes out monthly on the 27th, so this will be coming out tomorrow, actually. So definitely subscribe. This is going to be an interesting one. It's kind of interesting. It corresponds with regenerative farming is what we're talking about in this month's newsletter. So you can subscribe to that. All of the links for all of these things are in the description of the show. Definitely also feel free to share this with friends. So I think the important aspect of what we tried to do with this whole situation with building this in general was to share the word about what is going on, what is being done in the industry, and helping people to realize the positive things that are taking place that are just not not too shared around. So please do share with some people that might find this interesting, maybe people who could benefit from this directly. So share that. And I think, if there's any questions, feel free to always reach out. Maybe you have suggestions for future guests. Always glad to hear those recommendations. So feel free to reach out to me in any format you find. And yeah, with that, we'll see you next time on CleanTechies, the podcast.